My name is Eleanor Harper. I'm 64 years old. And right now, I'm staring at a dusty old photo on my desk. The one from our company picnic in 1995. I'm in the middle, awkwardly holding a watermelon, grinning like someone who still believed loyalty meant something. It's my second to last day at Summit Dynamics, the company I've given 29 years of my life to. My cubicle is half empty now, binders gone, drawers cleared. The soft whir of the building's HVAC hums like a lullaby to my soon-ending career. I should be thrilled, right? Retirement is supposed to be the champagne cork at the end of the marathon. But there's a strange heaviness in my chest, a chill, like something isn't quite right. So before you listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. Now, let's ease into the story together. All week, I'd been soaking up the quiet moments. My morning walks to the office with a latte in hand. Those nods from the security guard who's been there almost as long as me. The scent of fresh toner in the copier room. After nearly 3 decades, you don't just know a place, you carry it in your bones. Everyone knew I was retiring. HR had even scheduled my farewell luncheon for Friday. Nothing fancy, just a modest get-together in the break room. My closest friends at work, Linda Thompson from compliance especially, had been buzzing about it for weeks. I'd kept my head down for years, never rocked the boat. I wasn't a star, but I was steady. The kind of employee who kept things moving behind the scenes while others chased promotions. And for me, that was enough. Or, I thought it was. That morning, I came in early, my habit for the last 10 years. I wanted to clean out my Outlook folders and maybe print a few old photos from the intranet before my login expired. The building was still quiet, just the soft tap of heels echoing from the hallway. I didn't think much of it when my phone buzzed with a calendar invite. 9:30 a.m. Meeting with Mr. Langston, room 304. That gave me pause. My manager, Richard Langston, rarely scheduled one-on-ones, especially not with someone who was about to leave. But maybe it was a personal thank you, or a check-in before my send-off. A courtesy. I even put on lipstick. I walked into room 304 expecting a handshake, or maybe even a small card. Instead, I found Mr. Langston already seated, with a yellow manila folder in front of him. And beside him, Valerie Chen, the director of HR. Her mouth was tight. She didn't even say hello. Richard looked up at me like I'd interrupted something important. "Eleanor, please sit down." I sat. My palms were already sweating. He cleared his throat, glanced down at the folder, and started reading something like a script. Due to recent structural changes and shifting departmental budgets, we regret to inform you that your position has been terminated, effective immediately. I blinked. What? Valerie slid a stapled document toward me across the table like I was being served court papers. Your severance details are outlined here. As you were not formally retired, this will be treated as a standard termination under Policy Code 11A. You will not receive retirement benefits under the Tenured Employee Plan. I couldn't process it, but I'm retiring Friday. Everyone knows. My luncheon is literally on the calendar. Mr. Langston avoided my eyes. That plan requires a formal notice and retirement paperwork, which we did not receive in time. HR records indicate that you had not yet submitted the final form. But Valerie, I looked straight at her, voice rising slightly. You emailed me last week saying it was being processed. That was prior to the decision to eliminate your role, she said coolly. I felt like I was in a dream. No, not a dream, a trap. They timed it, waited until the paperwork could be used against me. 29 years, and this was how it ended? My heart pounded in my ears. I couldn't speak, couldn't cry. I just nodded. I took the folder, walked out. Back at my cubicle, I stared blankly at the desktop background, some generic image of mountain peaks. Summit Dynamics. Now the name felt cruelly ironic. I'd climbed, and now I was being shoved off the ledge. And the worst part? They timed it just right, so I'd lose my retirement benefits by a technicality. At 10:22 a.m., I packed the rest of my things, carefully placing my stapler and photo frame into a canvas tote. I didn't say goodbye to anyone, not even Linda, not yet. I was too numb. Outside, the sun was too bright, the world too normal. Birds chirped like nothing had happened. I called Michael, my husband, from the parking lot. They fired me. He paused. What? Why? I told him everything, my voice shaky but low. There was silence on the line. Come home, he finally said. We'll figure this out. But deep down, I already knew. This wasn't just a clerical mistake or a misunderstanding. This was intentional, a move, a message. And for the first time in years, I felt something spark in me that I hadn't felt since my 20s. Anger. When I got home, I didn't cry. I thought I would. I'd imagined this moment of walking away from work for the last time, of closing that chapter with peace, maybe even nostalgia. But instead of tears, there was this strange stillness inside me, like a quiet before a storm. Michael met me at the door. He didn't say anything at first, just pulled me into a hug. I stayed there for a while, letting the warmth of his arms soften the cold that had taken root in my chest. Then I stepped back, took a deep breath, and told him everything. Every word, every look, every little shift in tone that had screamed, "We planned this." He listened quietly. That's always been Michael's strength. He doesn't jump in with solutions until he knows you've laid it all out. And I laid it out. I gave them everything, I said finally, slumping into our kitchen chair. And they treated me like a liability, like trash they couldn't wait to dump before I cost them anything. He sat across from me, hands clasped. It's not right, but maybe, he hesitated. Maybe you just let it go, start fresh. We've got savings. Maybe this is the push to do all the things we said we would. I nodded, but only because I couldn't argue yet. My mind wasn't done processing. After he left for a quick errand, I went into my little office, sat down at my old laptop, and opened the termination folder. I read every line, 3 times. Their phrasing was so careful, so legal sounding. It all hinged on one clause. Retirement paperwork not finalized by internal deadline. It was the loophole they used to strip me of my pension benefits. And I remembered something. The email Valerie had sent me a week prior. She'd written, "Don't worry, I'll walk this through for you myself. Just sign the printed form Friday at the lunch." That email had made me trust the delay. I'd believed her, like a fool. I opened my inbox, found the email, and stared at it. There it was, dated, logged, polite as a lullaby. I copied it and saved a PDF version. And then I called Linda. She picked up on the first ring. "Hey, you okay? I heard something about you not being in today, and They fired me," I said. "What?" "Today, this morning, Langston and Valerie. They claimed my role was eliminated. And since I hadn't signed my final retirement form yet, I wasn't eligible for the full benefits." There was a long pause. "Eleanor, you told them you were retiring months ago. Everyone knew." "I know, and I have Valerie's email saying I could sign it Friday, but now they're pretending it never happened." "Oh my God," Linda sounded like she'd been punched. That's dirty, even for them." We talked for an hour. She promised to quietly check a few things on her end. And before she hung up, she said something that stuck with me. "They've been doing this more often lately, quiet terminations, waiting until someone's vulnerable, but I never thought they'd try it with you." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the meeting in room 304. The look on Richard Langston's face, almost apologetic, but not enough to stop him. He didn't believe in what he was doing, but he still did it. That made it worse. I started making notes, timelines, emails, witnesses. I wasn't sure what I'd do with them yet, but something inside me refused to be still. It wasn't about the money, not entirely. It was the principle, the theft of dignity. And the strange part? The more I sat with it, the more I remembered things from over the years. Tiny red flags I'd ignored. Promotions that passed me over for no reason. That weird reassignment 6 months ago where my team got shuffled under someone else. It was like the company had been slowly edging me out, and I'd been too loyal to notice. I looked up Summit Dynamics online. Their public image was spotless. Diversity awards, women in leadership programs, mentorship initiatives. The kind of PR sheen that hides rot. I even saw a LinkedIn post from Richard about celebrating our longtime employees who make this place what it is. The hypocrisy made my stomach turn. The next morning, I went back to that email from Valerie and drafted a formal reply. Dear Valerie, following up on our conversation and the termination notice received, I wanted to ensure that your email from last week, where you confirmed I would sign my retirement paperwork at Friday's luncheon, is formally acknowledged. Please confirm receipt. Best regards, Eleanor Harper. I CC'd myself and printed a copy, just in case. By mid-morning, Linda texted, I looked into the termination logs. Something's not right. Your job isn't actually listed as eliminated. Call me when you can. That was it, the final nudge. I pulled out an old manila folder, labeled it Retirement Firing, and began filling it. Emails, call logs, screenshots, names. Because now I had a mission. Linda and I had always been work friends, but that week, we became something more like quiet allies. A kind of sisterhood forged not over coffee breaks and office potlucks, but through shared outrage. When I called her back later that day, she picked up in a whisper. I'm in a conference room, she said. Closed door. I didn't want to talk in the open. There was tension in her voice I hadn't heard before. She wasn't just shocked, she was scared. Your position wasn't marked as eliminated in the HR system, she said. I looked through the internal logs. All other layoffs this quarter had official documentation filed with HRIS, except yours. The field next to your name just says, status changed. No reason provided. That's not protocol, Eleanor. I gripped the phone tighter, so they didn't eliminate my job. Nope, they eliminated you. There was a silence so heavy I could feel it pressing into my ribs. I sat down at the edge of my bed, feeling like the air had thickened around me. And get this, she continued, her voice lower. Right after you were terminated, they opened a special projects coordinator listing. It's basically your exact responsibilities, minus the pension eligibility. They're calling it a contract role with quarterly reviews. Lower salary, no benefits. They're trying to refill your chair before it even goes cold. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was outrageous. So they're repackaging my job and cutting it loose from retirement obligations. Exactly. Something shifted in me then. This wasn't just unfair, it was theft. Cold, calculated theft. And I wasn't going to take it lying down. After we hung up, I found myself pacing, back and forth, back and forth. My mind was racing through every memory of the past year, all the red flags. I remembered when Langston asked me, out of the blue, if I had officially set a date for retirement. I'd laughed at the time and said, well, you'll know when I bring in cake. I thought we were joking. But now I saw it differently. They'd been fishing for my exit plan, waiting for the perfect gap, and I'd walked right into it. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the old manila folder again. Inside, I started labeling sections. Email evidence, timeline, witnesses, policy discrepancies, job listing screenshot. It was like building a case, and honestly, it felt good, like taking control. Every page I added to that folder was one more piece of power I was reclaiming. That night over dinner, I told Michael everything Linda had found. He listened silently, fork paused midair. This isn't just unethical, I said. It might actually be illegal. You're going to fight? He asked. I looked him dead in the eyes. I have to. He reached for my hand. Then let's do it right. The next morning, I made a few calls. I started with the State Labor Board, who referred me to a nonprofit legal clinic. The woman on the phone, Janine, sounded both sympathetic and sharp. Unfortunately, we've seen an uptick in retirement manipulation, she said. Employers trying to dodge long-term obligations. If you have documentation, we'd be happy to review it. I sent her everything I had. Later that day, I also reached out to an attorney named Samuel Brooks, someone Linda's husband had used for a contract dispute years ago. When I explained my situation over the phone, he asked a single question that stuck with me. Did they fire you, Eleanor, or did they fire your benefits? That question rattled in my mind for hours. When I met with Samuel 2 days later, he came prepared. He was calm but firm, the kind of person who never raised his voice because he didn't have to. His words carried weight. "You have a strong case," he said after reading through the materials, "especially with this email from HR and the reposted job listing. That's damning." He leaned back in his chair. "This wasn't a firing. This was a denial of earned benefits. They calculated when you were most vulnerable, and they moved first." I felt the heat rise in my chest. "So what are my options?" "Well," he said, folding his hands together, "you could sue. It would be lengthy and public. Or you could settle quietly, but from a position of strength. Either way, we send a message." I left that meeting with a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to reclaim my dignity. But I needed to be strategic. I didn't want revenge. I wanted restoration. I wanted them to know they couldn't do this to people and walk away whistling. That evening, Linda called again. "You good?" she asked gently. "Better than I've been in days," I replied. I told her about the meeting with Samuel, and she sounded genuinely relieved. Then she added something I didn't expect. "By the way, people are talking. Some of the younger staff are starting to whisper about what happened. You've always been the reliable one. The idea that they could do this to you, it's shaking people." I smiled. "Good. Because maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just about me anymore. The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't just sting once. It keeps flaring up unexpectedly, in the quiet. I'd be making tea, folding laundry, and suddenly that morning in room 304 would flash through my mind like a slap. But now I had purpose, and that made all the difference. Samuel had advised me to keep things discreet. "We want them to think you're stunned and walking away," he said. "That gives us leverage." So I played the part. I didn't post anything. I didn't rant online. When coworkers texted, I responded vaguely. Yeah, it happened fast, just figuring out my next chapter. But privately, I was collecting. Linda, bless her heart, became my eyes on the inside. She was cautious, never emailing from work accounts, always calling from her personal phone. But her updates were golden. "They've already scheduled interviews for the special projects role," she whispered one day. "It's basically your job, but they shaved off anything that required seniority. Valerie even joked that they'd dodged a pension bullet." I wanted to scream. That image of Valerie, smirking, smug, lit a fire in me I didn't know I had. Because it wasn't just about a job. It was about years of sacrifice. Birthdays missed, weekends lost, holidays shortened to finish reports no one would remember. And I kept hearing stories from Linda, about others. "Remember Marjorie in accounting," she said. "Same thing happened to her last year, right before her 30-year milestone. Poof, job gone, benefits cut." Patterns, that's what it was. A pattern of strategic cruelty, all masked under the language of budgeting and streamlining. One night, I sat in bed scrolling through the employee handbook I'd saved years ago. There it was. The clause that said any employee with over 25 years of service who announced retirement within 90 days would receive full pension benefits, provided HR approval was documented. Valerie's email wasn't just a courtesy, it was the approval. I had it in writing. I highlighted it, saved the page. The next day, Samuel sent me a message. "Drafting a formal letter to Summit. Want to review tomorrow?" When we met, he showed me the document. Clear, calm, devastating. This correspondence is a formal notification of Ms. Eleanor Harper's intent to pursue legal action based on discriminatory and retaliatory termination practices intended to deprive her of earned retirement benefits. Attached is an internal email from Summit HR Director Valerie Chen, which contradicts the stated justification for the firing. Additional evidence includes a duplicate job listing for Ms. Harper's former role, which was posted less than 48 hours post-termination. It ended with a gentle nudge toward settlement, return benefits, restore reputation, or face a public fight. He looked up from the letter and raised an eyebrow. "Ready to sign?" I picked up the pen and signed. Later that afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table with a fresh cup of tea, staring out the window at the oak tree in our yard. Its leaves had begun to change, little bursts of gold at the edges. For the first time in weeks, I felt grounded. The next few days passed slowly. Samuel sent the letter via certified mail and email. And then, we waited. Linda called almost daily. No signs of panic yet, she'd report. But there's this Tension, like the air in the office is heavier. Valerie hasn't been as chatty. On the third day, things shifted. Samuel forwarded me a terse reply from Summit's legal team. We are reviewing the allegations. Please allow us time to gather all internal documentation. Translation, they were scrambling. I smiled to myself. Because they knew they'd crossed a line. And now, their silence wasn't power, it was fear. That evening, Michael and I went for a walk. The air was crisp, the sky tinged with orange and lavender. We walked in silence for a while, until he asked, "Do you think they'll settle?" I nodded. They don't want this to go public. "Do you want to settle?" That made me pause. I want what's fair, but I also want them to feel it, even just a little. He squeezed my hand. Then don't let them off too easy. A few more days passed. Then the email arrived. Subject: Settlement Negotiation Proposal, E. Harper. Samuel called me before I could even open it. They're offering the full pension, retroactive reinstatement of benefits, 1-year severance, and get this, a written apology without admission of wrongdoing. I felt a strange mix of vindication and bitterness. It wasn't justice exactly, but it was close. They want a non-disclosure clause, Samuel added. Standard. But I can push for an exception that allows you to discuss your personal experience in general terms. I want that exception, I said immediately. That night, I sat down and wrote out everything that had happened, not for the court, but for myself. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. Maybe a blog, maybe a podcast, or maybe I just read it to my grandkids one day when they asked what strength looks like. But one thing was clear. This story wasn't over. A week after the offer came through, I stood in the middle of my living room, staring at the final settlement packet. Pages of legalese, all neatly bound together. Somewhere in that stack was the signature line that would bring this war to a quiet close. I didn't rush to sign it. Instead, I brewed a pot of coffee. I took the packet out to the porch, and I read every word, slowly, deliberately. I owed that to myself. After all the years I'd rushed through reports and budgets and HR memos on behalf of Summit Dynamics, I wasn't going to let them speed me through this. The offer wasn't perfect, but it was real. Full restoration of my pension, an additional year's severance, which Michael called hush money with a smile. The apology letter was hollow, more of a carefully constructed corporate shrug than an expression of remorse, but it acknowledged that I had been wronged. And more importantly, it opened the door for me to speak. Samuel had pushed back on the NDA, crafting a carve-out that allowed me to share my experience publicly, as long as I didn't use exact names, titles, or proprietary data. It wasn't total freedom, but it was enough. I signed. And just like that, the war was over, at least on paper. But inside, it didn't feel over, not yet. I still woke up some mornings expecting to walk into that beige office with its buzzing fluorescence. I still dreamed about spreadsheets and overdue performance reviews. You don't just walk away from 3 decades of structure and loyalty without an echo. Michael and I celebrated quietly, a bottle of wine, takeout from our favorite Italian place, and a long, reflective talk. You know, he said between bites of lasagna, you could tell your story, not in a courtroom, just in your own voice. Let people know what happens when companies treat people like numbers. I nodded slowly. I've thought about it. I didn't want revenge, but I wanted impact. Over the next few days, I began writing, not with rage, but with resolve. I started crafting a long-form post about what I'd been through. I stripped away the names, changed the company, but I told the truth. Every subtle manipulation, every red flag, every betrayal that didn't look like betrayal until it was too late. I titled it, "They Fired Me a Day Before Retirement. Here's what that taught me about loyalty." I hit publish on a Thursday morning. By Friday afternoon, the post had been shared over 3,000 times. People poured into the comments. Stories from nurses, teachers, retail workers, IT specialists, all recounting eerily similar experiences. This happened to my dad. They eliminated his role a month before his 25-year bonus. I was promised a promotion for 3 years, then laid off the week I got pregnant. Thank you for saying it. We're not crazy, we're just expendable in their eyes. The messages were raw, unfiltered, and they reminded me why I'd done this. Linda texted that night. Everyone at work saw the post. They know it's about you. Valerie looks like she's seen a ghost. I chuckled. It wasn't spite, it was poetic justice. The company never issued a public response. But behind the scenes, things began shifting. Linda told me HR suddenly began reviewing all pending retirement transitions. A quiet course correction. A week later, I received a handwritten note in my mailbox. No return address, just a neat cursive. You don't know me, but I'm 59. I've worked for Summit for 21 years. After reading your story, I filed my retirement paperwork immediately. Thank you for the warning. I sat down on the porch and let the tears come, not out of grief, but release. This fight had started as a defense of my own dignity, but somewhere along the way, it had become a signal flare for others. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just closing a chapter. I was helping rewrite the book. From then on, I made it a point to speak more freely. I gave a guest talk at a local women's networking group about retirement readiness and legal red flags. I even got a request to appear on a podcast called Workplace Whispers, to tell my story to a broader audience. People need to hear this, the host told me. Not everyone knows how easily they can lose what they've earned. And I agreed. Because the system was never designed to protect us. But our voices, our stories, they could shake it. That podcast episode changed everything. I didn't think much of it at first. Just a 45-minute Zoom call with a cheerful host named Mara who introduced me as a woman who stood up when the system tried to sit her down. We recorded it on a rainy Tuesday, the kind of afternoon that usually makes you want to curl up and forget the world. Instead, I sat in front of my laptop, wearing a soft navy sweater, and told the story again, this time with a steadier voice. I shared how I walked into that beige meeting room expecting a handshake and got a pink slip. How Valerie's false promises almost cost me everything I'd worked for. How I found my backbone not in a courtroom, but in a coffee-stained manila folder at my kitchen table. The episode went live the following week. By Thursday, my inbox was flooded. Messages from strangers, older workers, women mostly. People who had given decades to companies only to be edged out before they could claim what they were promised. The stories were heartbreaking and eerily similar, each one confirming what I had come to suspect. This wasn't an isolated event. This was systemic rot. One message stood out. I used to think my layoff was my fault, that maybe I wasn't worth keeping, but hearing your story helped me understand. This was never about performance. It was about timing, about power. Thank you. I cried reading that one, and I started replying to every email. Slowly, sometimes in the middle of the night, with a mug of chamomile tea by my side, I wrote back. Not with advice. I'm not a lawyer, but with solidarity. You're not alone. You're not crazy. You were betrayed. And something strange began to happen. Other podcasts reached out. A couple of online magazines. A local NPR affiliate even wanted to do a segment on the retirement cliff and how companies game the system. I wasn't chasing attention, I promise you. I never wanted to be a face on a thumbnail. But I knew if I stayed quiet, this whole thing would go right back into the shadows. So I spoke, softly but firmly. I told the truth. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Summit Dynamics was crumbling just a little. Linda filled me in, carefully, in code over text. They're doing internal audits, legals all over HR, Valerie's on sabbatical. Langston barely shows his face. I couldn't lie, reading that gave me a petty kind of satisfaction. But more than that, I felt protective. Not of the company, of the people still there. People like Linda, who couldn't just walk away. People whose mortgages and medical bills were still tethered to a system that treated them like chess pieces. One night, Linda called me. I talked to HR, she said carefully. I asked about retirement policies, just to test the waters. What did they say? They gave me a new form, different from the one you had. It now says employees must receive a signed confirmation within 48 hours of notifying intent to retire. Black and white. I sat back. They're changing policy because of you. That hit me harder than I expected. Because that's what I'd hoped for, not revenge, reform. It was around then that I started journaling again, not for the internet or interviews, but for myself. I wrote about what it felt like to have a career erased in 15 minutes, about the slow rebuilding of my identity outside a job title, about how strange it felt to no longer be Eleanor from Summit, just Eleanor. It was hard, I won't sugarcoat it. Some days I still woke up feeling lost, like I should be packing a lunch and checking my calendar. The routine had been my religion for so long, and now I was free-floating. But then, other days, I found beauty in the quiet. I took walks in the late morning. I picked up painting again, nothing fancy, just soft landscapes and sketches of flowers I couldn't name. I joined a book club. I laughed more with Michael. Life began to fill in the cracks. And through it all, I kept hearing from people. They'd write, saying things like, "I printed your story and took it to my HR. I told my dad to check his retirement paperwork. He found a missing clause. You made me feel like I matter again." And every time, I felt like I'd lit a candle in someone's dark room. Not because I was special, but because I hadn't stayed quiet. One afternoon, I got a message from a woman named Cynthia. She was 61, 2 years from retirement, and terrified. They just reassigned me to a new role with no clear responsibilities. It feels like they're setting me up to fail. What should I do? I couldn't give her legal advice, but I told her this. Document everything. Screenshot your communications. Confirm things over email. And above all, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. You deserve a dignified exit. Don't let them write your ending for you. She thanked me, and that was it. Sometimes it's not about fixing everything. Sometimes it's just about helping someone stay standing. I never went back to Summit Dynamics. Not once. Not even to pick up my nameplate or the little framed quote on my desk that read, "Success is built on consistency." Linda offered to box up the last of my things, but I told her to toss it. The chapter was closed. And besides, I didn't need a plastic plaque to remind me of my worth. But the story didn't end there. Several weeks after the podcast wave calmed down, I got an invitation, an odd, formal little envelope addressed in blue ink. It was from the State Employment Practices Board. They were holding a panel on corporate retirement practices, and they wanted me to speak. Me, Eleanor Harper, a woman who once spent 10 years eating the same turkey sandwich at her desk because she didn't think taking a lunch break looked committed enough. I showed up wearing the blazer I used to save for budget presentations, navy blue with a little silver pin at the collar. I didn't go to be dramatic. I went to be heard. The room wasn't big, but it was full. Lawyers, HR professionals, a couple of journalists, and most importantly, people like me. People with silver hair and tired eyes who had been walked out the door a few months too early. I sat on a panel with 3 others. One woman had worked for a school district. Another had been in sales. A man named Ruben had given 32 years to a car manufacturer only to be phased out, right before his stock options vested. We each shared our version of the same story. And I watched as heads nodded, eyes welled up, pens scribbled notes. I spoke slowly, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted every word to land. I wasn't let go because I couldn't do the job, I said. I was let go because I'd become expensive, because honoring what I'd earned meant a little less profit on a spreadsheet. I told them about Valerie's email, about the repackaged job, about the apology letter that wasn't really an apology. But more than that, I said, I want you to understand the human cost. I didn't just lose money, I lost trust. I lost the story I thought I was living. And when I finished, there was a moment of quiet, not applause, just stillness. That stillness said, "We hear you." Afterward, a young woman approached me, early 30s maybe, HR manager for a mid-sized firm. She said, "I've read so many policies, but I've never heard it like this. I'm going back to my office with new eyes." And that was worth everything. Not long after, I started writing more formally. Not viral posts, not exposés, just essays, reflections. I published a piece titled, "Retirement Isn't a Gift, It's a Contract." Another one, "What Happens When Loyalty is a Liability." They circulated through quiet channels, LinkedIn groups, newsletters, industry discussion boards. And people kept writing back, It wasn't fame, it was resonance. And honestly, that felt better. Sometimes I'd get messages asking what I do now. Are you starting a nonprofit? A workers' rights group? And I'd laugh gently. No, I'm gardening. I'm reading mystery novels again. I'm walking my neighbor's golden retriever, Max, twice a week. I'm remembering what it means to exist without a badge or a calendar full of meetings. But I'm also watching, listening, encouraging. Because I know there's another Eleanor out there, standing in a beige office, hearing the words, "Your role has been eliminated." And I want her to have the words I didn't have then. You are not a budget line. You are not an obstacle to be removed. You are not disposable. You are the engine that kept things running. You are the roots under the shiny new tree, and you deserve to leave with your head held high. So if that day ever comes, if they try to erase you before the credits roll, remember this. You can fight back. You can speak up. And most importantly, you can reclaim your ending. To Mr. Langston and Ms. Chen, wherever you are now, I hope you've taken a long, hard look in the mirror. I hope you ask yourselves if the savings were worth the scar you left behind. And I hope the next time you try to cut corners, you remember my name. To the rest of you watching, I want you to know that sometimes, losing what you thought defined you is the first step toward becoming something stronger. Have you ever faced something like this? A betrayal at the finish line? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one, and believe me, someone else out there needs to hear it too. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and remind yourself that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. Wherever you are in your journey, I'm rooting for you. Stay brave, stay grounded. And when the world tells you you're done, write your own final chapter.